Welcome to the Addiction Connection podcast, connecting the hope of the gospel with the heart of addiction. I'm your host, Mark Shaw, and I've got in studio a special guest today, Josh Brunk. He's the director of Village Mercy. It's a ministry in South Africa. And so while I've got him stateside, I want to make sure I had a podcast featuring him and his ministry, because the Addiction Connection loves what Josh and his church are doing there in South Africa. So before we get to interviewing Josh, let me read one of their key verses in the ministry. It's John 8, verse 36, and probably just about everybody who listens to this will know this verse. But from the ESV, it says, well, I'm gonna start back and read a couple verses back. So verse 34 of John chapter 8, it says, Jesus answered them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The son remains forever." Here's the key verse, verse 36. "So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." And so that is the heartbeat of this ministry that you're going to learn about today on this podcast about Village Mercy Ministry. So Josh, tell us a little bit about the history. And I know I was kind of involved a little bit in that, just the prayer and wanting to do this. And I came down and visited, but even before that, I could just see you guys had all the ingredients to bake a cake. And from that, I mean, you had a local church, you had a body of believers, and you had a lot of the key ingredients you need to do an addiction ministry. So tell us a little bit about the history of that.
Yeah, sure. And what I'll do is go back to, it would have been 8 years ago. My parents sent me to a ministry up in the Seattle area called the Mission House in Port Orchard, Washington at the time. And it was there that I finally understood that the hope for my life was basically the sanctification process, just the application of the Bible to life, to change the behavior on the outside. And while I was in there, maybe just about 3 months in, you came and visited us up there. And so that was my first introduction to you. I had read your book, The Heart of Addiction. I don't think I'd read anything else at the time yet, but I had read that and worked on the workbook. And then you came to visit. And sometime right around there, I started realizing, look, this isn't just the hope or the answer for me. This is what any believer needs, whether socially seen as a sinner or not. This is the answer for any believer, is that sanctification, the application of the biblical principles to. So I talked with my director at the time there, I talked with you, and I talked with my dad, who's the pastor at our church down in Johannesburg, about the idea of taking a similar ministry down to the Johannesburg area. And so over the course of the next 6 or so years, we talked about it. We here and there, we strategized a little bit here and there, and every time we would take a couple steps forward, we would hit some resistance or things wouldn't come together. And so it was kind of always out on the horizon. And then you guys came down and visited. So in 2019,
Yep.
you came down with a group of guys and ladies.
Yeah. Oh, no, nice people.
Not everybody, yeah. And
I was the only hooligan in the group.
And we did a conference there. So
Yeah.
You helped put on an addictions conference there in the Johannesburg area. Really piqued the interest of a lot of people in the area, and kind of got us set on the course of pursuing this a little bit more seriously. We even went out and checked out a piece of property as a potential for where the ministry might be located. And
boy, that was a beautiful property. I wanted that for you guys in the worst way, but I also saw some challenges with it being further away and not close to the church and different things like that. But boy, that property was I don't think you could design a better property for what you guys wanted to use it for. But I know that didn't happen, so I'm probably...
Yeah, no, and that's fine. But I mean, there was a lot of good things about it that also identified the types of things we would need, I think, as we look forward into the future of what we want to build the property we currently have into. When you left, we were actively pursuing getting the ministry started, and in the beginning of 2020, So in February of 2020, we actually launched a concept of Village Mercy, it's more as an outpatient, if I can put it in that terminology, where we would help guys during the day, but we wouldn't offer any residence, any room or board. And we had that up for an entire week before we got put into a stage 5, level 5 lockdown by our government because of COVID. And so we weren't even allowed out of our houses, let alone doing anything out in the community. And so we put that all on hold. We kind of kept the Village Mercy ministry going by doing food distributions and doing a radio broadcast just to keep ourselves active. But we were really not thinking about a residential program at all at that point. And then in October of 2020, so just a little over a year ago, a lady came to us with 2 men that were homeless, living on the streets, and they were addicted to a drug in South Africa called niape, which is a heroin-based drug that's cut with a very high percentage of rat poison. And basically what happens is that guys that know they want heroin or some sort of a pain substitute take it for that high. And then within a few days, they're no longer taking it because of the high, but as their stomach is eaten away, they're taking it to dull the pain. And the life expectancy for guys once they get on that drug is 1 to 2 years. It's a very sad situation. So she came to us with these 2 guys, and we had no house, we had no house manager, we had really no funding yet.
Perfect.
Exactly.
That's what God wants, right?
That's how he tends to do things, right? And so we said, look, we can either we can pray about this and try to figure out how to make this work, or we have to go back and say, we can't really help you guys. And we didn't want to do the latter, but we couldn't do the former. And so we decided to put the matter to prayer. We sent out letters to some of the local congregations telling them the need. And within 3 days, we had both a house and a house manager. And so at that point, we were like, okay, well, now we have to do it. We still don't have the funding, but at least we know God is in this, and we need to move forward with it. So that was how the foundation was laid for Village Mercy, and we're coming up now on a year. In the next couple of weeks, we will hit a year of having the men's residential program together.
Yeah, boy, that's great. Yeah, when I say you guys had the ingredients, I mean, you had the plan. I know you were very willing to get involved. God was calling other people to get involved. And then you had the church. So talk to us a little bit about the church there, Katoris Bible Church, where your dad's pastored 20 years, you told me. It's just amazing. And so so I visited this church and went to a service there. Dr. Bill Hines taught Sunday school, and then we were there in the service. And back then, I don't know if it's still the case, you can update me, but you guys met at a school, and you had to sweep out the schoolroom and set up all the chairs, and it was just precious. And then there was a break in the middle of it where there was one-on-one disciple making going on, where people would meet with their disciple maker and learn in the middle of the service, I think. And then you go back to the worship service, and there was a South African man who preached that Sunday, did a great job. And your dad, I know, disciples people, disciples men especially, and your mom's involved in that as well. And the culture there is one of building people up, growing them into Christ. So tell us a little bit about the church.
Sure. So just to update the situation, when the strict lockdowns happened, the schools are obviously government run and everything. And so we were kind of forced out of the school scenario because of lockdowns, but as were all the rest of the churches meeting in schools. And so during lockdown, what happened is we started actively looking for a piece of property, which we had been looking for 20 years, but we now saw that we needed something immediate if we were going to get out of the lockdown and be able to still meet somewhere. And so the Lord provided a piece of land, about 5.5 acres. It's a farmland, and so it's 5.5 of completely usable property. And
how far away would you say it is from the school you were meeting at?
From the school, it's about a 20-minute drive, but the school wasn't completely central to the location which we ministered. This property is a little bit outside of the main area, but it's doable from all directions, and it's off of the major highway, so it's really not inconvenient for anybody to get there. So even though it's not centrally located, from a travel perspective, it's very accessible. And so we actually bought a tent that we put up every week. In fact, the guys at the Village Mercy residential house do that every single week for us. So that's one of the ways that they minister to us. And so no more sweeping of the room, but we've got to put up the tent and put up chairs and take things down. And then currently the men are residing at a 5-bedroom house that's about 5 minutes from the church property. And they store all of the stuff there for us. They bring it, they set it up, and they're actively involved. And that's a real blessing, I think, for them, but also obviously for the church to have them involved in that. My dad, as you said, is very, his main thrust in all of the ministry is that discipleship process, which obviously goes hand in hand with counseling, just being a more intensified type of discipleship. And so
he's got his master's in
biblical counseling. Yep.
Not many pastors have that.
Yeah, and he's really integrating it into the church sermons and everything, which is, I think, how it's supposed to be done anyway. Not just counseling during the weekdays and then a sermon on. You have it right there built into the sermons on the Sundays, and it's really refreshing to hear the word that way. But then, as a result, the whole atmosphere of the church is discipling one another, and so it's not just the pastors and elders that are trying to teach and train and disciple everybody, but you've got everybody working together on that discipleship process. And what has happened very naturally, nobody had to actually say that this needed to happen, is that we got the residential men's program going. Some of the young men at the church were already getting together after Sunday services to meet and have some lunch and fellowship together, and they just automatically included the men at the residential house. And so they're getting fellowship with the other young men in the church very automatically, and getting discipleship that's not planned, it's not on the schedule, but now other people in the church are getting involved in that process, and it becomes a very
organic.
It's very organic,
like that.
For sure.
Yeah. That's kind of how Jesus did it, didn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. No schedule. It was just.
It seems that way when we read the Bible. I'm sure he was a planner and scheduled too, but he
certainly was upset when they disrupted his sleep times in the middle of the storms. But yeah. And then as far as the how things look from when you were there, we've actually added about 20 people to the church, and most of them younger people that have come out of some of the health and wealth circles, and they're just on fire. And so actually the three individuals that are currently working with Village Mercy are all newer guys that came out of that, and they're just eager to not only learn and be fed, but to then pour into others.
I was impressed with
Tlacanipo.
Say it again.
Tlacanipo, and I'm sure I slaughter that. Yeah. It's an NH to start the name, and it means wisdom is what that literally means.
He's a very impressive young man.
Yeah.
I mean, very impressive, and I know he's involved as well.
He's my assistant, and while I'm here in the States, he's running everything. I stay very connected to him, but I have no concerns about how things are going because he's very, very good.
Yeah. Well, God is faithful. So now with the ministry established, tell us a little bit about some of your needs, financial needs, some of the plans you have for the future, but start with just needs first, I guess.
Okay. Probably the biggest need is that we have no consistent support, so no monthly support. We've been operating off of donations, which has definitely been helpful, but it's really hard to plan for next month and have confidence that we're going to have the food and everything for next month with that. So we need about $3,000 a month in regular donations just to pay salaries, to pay rent, to buy food and gas, petrol in South Africa.
But you said $3,000 a month. For Americans, right? Yeah, $3,000, not rand, because you guys have a different currency. Right. But for an addiction ministry that's proclaiming the gospel, discipling men, helping families, and the wives are helped, the kids, the community's helped, the church is helped. For $3,000 a month, that's doable for. There are people listening, maybe even right now, who could stroke a check and cover your minimal costs for 1 month.
Yeah.
or maybe even the whole year. I mean, that's, and I know that's minimal. There's more need than that. You're kind of, I know you're not hitting me with, boy, we'd love to have, 10,000 a month, but you're saying, man, just 3,000 can really help us meet the minimal needs, and that's not an expansion or anything. But
we wouldn't need to worry about anything. That's the main thing. If we had that, we would know that we're set for the upcoming months, and we would be okay. That covers all the basics, and so it would even replace me as director, and that's the ultimate goal as well, to get it as indigenized as possible. The beyond
but
that,
you've lived there how long? You've been in
10
South,
of the last 15 years, so I've been back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, and you married a wonderful South African girl.
She's an evidence of the grace of God, for sure.
And have 3 wonderful children.
Yeah.
So you're South African.
Yeah.
Just raise your right hand. We'll swear you
Yeah,
in
right.
right now.
So it's I guess closer than having somebody that's just fresh from America, but it still
Right.
would be better to have somebody that speaks the languages and
Yeah,
operates in
I
the same
agree, yeah.
economics and everything.
Well, it'd be nice for you to not be the hands-on director,
Right.
but letting Klakanapo and some of the other men do some of that one-on-one disciple making, where you're teaching, helping, but also doing executive director type things. That's the eventual goal.
And one of the things that we have already immediately put into place is that when I go back, I'm not going to try to take over anything that I was previously doing. So I'll help out if need be, but those guys are competent. They're doing a good job. And if I can continue just letting them do that, there's other things like the women's residential program and the ministry of counseling to family members that my dad's got that passion for. That we can help out in, and then even starting other. I mean, right now we are the only biblical counseling addictions program in South Africa. So if we can get other ones started, that would be awesome. But we'll see. Right now things are going great with the guys that are currently there, and so it's a blessing to be able to witness that. And there's plenty of work to still be done, so we won't run out of work. You asked about other funding needs.
Oh, funding needs. Yes.
Right now we're renting a 5-bedroom house, and it's not just a small little house. It's what you would think of as a 5-bedroom house here in the States, with about an acre property, and we can actually purchase a house of that same size for about $60,000 US. So again, very cheap for an American mind, but it would set us up with our housing needs for the distant future. And one of the goals with that is that we would find a place even that may need some work, let the guys in the house, as part of their work in the program, fix it up and then flip it and sell it and actually build up some capital that way. So that's one of our more immediate things that we would like to do. That would cut out the rental cost, and it would give work to the guys, and it would slowly build the capital as we are able to continue flipping the house, presumably. We've got about a quarter of that already that is towards that. So we're already significantly on the way. And one of our ideas is when we get back there, regardless of whether we have the rest in place or not, that we actually put that as a down payment. And instead of paying towards rent, we're paying towards the paying off of that house.
Yeah. So you'll end up owning it.
Right.
And you said it's only, 5 minutes or so from the church?
Well, the house where we're renting is 5 minutes from the church property.
But
we want to build on the church property eventually, yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's right. You told me that.
And I say church property, but it's dual owned. So Village Mercy owns 80% and Keturus Bible Church owns 20%. Right now we're working together, so we can build one building and share it for the time being.
Man, that's awesome. What a great testimony. And I love a program that's tethered to the local church. I just think that's so important. And in this case, it doesn't get more tethered than father, son working together, and all the other members of your church family. We absolutely loved the people we met there. Were just you could tell the work that your dad, we were enjoying the fruit of his labor,
Sure.
From just all the men he's discipling and having dinner in a few homes and just the great people you have there. So those are some of the current needs. When you compare it to American programs and American, costs, this is just a fraction of that. So how would people in the United States donate to Village Mercy?
And right now, I don't have a link on our webpage. That's something that I've got to get on there. But if you can get onto our webpage, it's villagemercy.co.za.
ZA as in zoo.
As in zoo. So
Zoo
ZA.
animals.
We say ZA in the British English. But yeah. So co.z as in zoo A. And that takes you to our website. If you reach out to us, I can send you the link for that.
And we'll put that in the podcast notes and different things so that people can get there. And I know the Addiction Connection, we've taken up a special offering, and from time to time in our newsletters, we let people know about what you guys are doing and ask people to give. And if they designate that gift to South Africa, we call it our South African Initiative. If they donate to that and make sure they specify that, we send all the money to you. We don't take any money off the top. We don't take any fees or anything. And if somebody donates and PayPal knocks a little bit off, we just eat the loss there, because we believe in what you're doing and we want you to get the full amount. So people can donate to the Addiction Connection, designate it South African Initiative, and we will send that money just to you guys.
Yeah.
So
and that also takes care of the tax purposes for as far as going through an NPO, right?
Yeah, we're 501c3, so we'll write them a tax deduction letter at the end of the year, and it's real easy. We're happy to do that, and I don't know if I can share. My board hasn't really told me, but we've gotten some significant money in from our little ministry to donate to you guys, and we're just really thankful about that. So hoping that continues. We don't have the regular monthly donors either for this ministry, so it's tough to say, oh, Josh, Mike, we're gonna be able to donate to Village Mercy, X amount of dollars. It's like, well, I don't want to promise that and then not be able to deliver, and we don't go into debt and any of that. And I know you're good stewards of your money. I mean, you put your own personal money in at times to fund this ministry and to get it going. That's what I've done with the Addiction Connection. Right. There were years I was the largest donor to this ministry, which is kind of sad, but I just believed in what we were doing and knew, God is faithful and he blessed me enough to give a little bit. And so that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. I mean, it looks foolish, when I even talk about that, I know people are listening and saying, man, what a fool. But
and there's a balance to it, obviously.
There is a balance, yeah. You don't want to be too far, one way or the other. But it's fun to see God work at just the right time. And now you have these stories, like the 3 days. I mean, for God to provide a rental house and a person in 3 days.
And to be honest, what that did is established in our minds that God was in this. And so instead of starting this because all the funds were there, we started it because, man, God is obviously behind this. How can we refuse to do this? And we knew that those first several months were going to be really difficult, and they were. They were so difficult. If we didn't have those 3 days and the experience of how God had started things, we would have been contemplating quitting. But because we were so certain that God was in this, it was easy to just continue to move on. Easy in the sense that we knew this wasn't our doing. And so we were allowed to just let God continue to operate, and he continued to be faithful in the supplying of the needs.
Yeah, I think about it as in the book of Joshua, which you probably like, Josh, the Joshua chapter 4, the crossing of the Jordan River at flood stage. The first guys carrying the Ark of the Covenant had to step in. The first priest, I can imagine saying, hey, aren't I in the back today? And another priest in the front. But you got to step in. God stops the waters. All the people crossed over. Just a miracle that way. And I'm not, inferring this is like that, but it is that first step of obedience. And I see you guys taking that. And it wasn't unwise, just we're going to be fools and just pour our money into. You guys really had a plan. Again, we met 8 years ago, but I know we've talked over the years about the plan and getting things in place and really and the missing ingredient maybe in the cake was some of the financial backing.
Right.
But that's starting to flow and come in. And I think sometimes when you build it, they will come. That's not biblical.
If
but
it's in God's program, then it works.
Right. That's right. Well, I'm excited about what you're doing, and I just I love it. I've loved it from day one. And the story when I met you, how I don't remember. I remember seeing you. I remember how you were sitting. You were real antsy and kind of just.
I always have been.
Yeah, I just remember you being real antsy. Of all the guys there, you were kind of moving. And I don't remember. Do you remember that? How we met that first time?
I only remember a couple things specifically about like how we interacted or anything. I remember you were very positive, obviously, about the idea of doing a ministry down in South Africa. I was only a couple, maybe 3 months through the program, so there was a lot to work on still in the program. So I don't know how much you were confident that was all going to come together at the time, but you were at least enthusiastic about the idea. Right. But you said a couple things. The first thing that you said, you were talking to another guy who was from a background that wasn't religious at all, but had a lot of enthusiasm and zeal. And you said, often it's not the church kids that know all the information that God really rescues in these situations and brings through it and then uses greatly. And I didn't take offense at it, honestly, but I did take it as a motivation that, man, if I'm going to be serious about this, I really need to, the odds are against me and kind of how God works normally, but then we recognize that God still has grace. The second thing that you said was that really motivated me was that former addicts make the best evangelists, and that really stuck with me in the sense that it's not just a mistake that God somehow salvages and makes a little bit okay, and we're all happy with what He does. He actually uses that in His providence and His sovereign ordination. I've been challenged by the book of Jonah this last year and looking at the disobedient prophet and just the two quick examples from that book. The sailors on their way to Tarshish from Joppa were saved as a result of the direct disobedience of God's prophet. And so God's sovereign ordination in bringing to salvation these sailors, it's mind-boggling. And then even the Ninevites through the disobedience and the restoration of God's prophet. And so it's not just that God makes the best of a bad situation. God, like the master general, uses the strength of the weakness against the strength of the enemies against them. And so He uses sin and wickedness against His enemy and actually brings it about to good. And that's why Paul exclaims there at the end of Romans 11 about the wisdom of our God is just uncomprehensible in our minds.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, only a redemptive, loving, planning, sovereign God can use our sin to save people,
right.
And
including us.
Yeah, amen. Well, I'm very excited again. So villagemercy.co.za, or you can go to our website at theaddictionconnection.org and donate directly to support what Josh is doing. I hope you'll prayerfully consider doing that. All of our listeners, it's just neat to see what God's doing there, and having been there firsthand, I was just so pleased, so impressed by what God was doing there in what looks to be, a foolish ministry in the world's eyes, because you don't have this and you don't have that in their eyes. But what you do have is the hope of the gospel. You have the message, you have the word of God, you have faithful church body members who are willing to pour into these guys' lives and help their families. I think a lot of times people think, addiction ministry just helps the 10 or 12 guys in the program, but it reaches, look at your life. Right. Your wife and children are blessed now because of the effort of, the folks at the mission house and all those guys that have poured into you.
Absolutely.
What a blessing, So I encourage our listeners to get behind this and support the ministry.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you've been on the podcast. We will end here, and we'll tell our listeners, take care and God bless.